Hello, my name is Megan Groff, and today I will be presenting on the cultural impact of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Ratified in 1920, this amendment guaranteed women the right to vote in the United States and marked a major turning point in American democracy. This moment was not just a legal change, but the result of decades of activism and social transformation. In this presentation, I will analyze this event through both historical and philosophical perspectives to show how it reflects broader societal changes and continues to influence our understanding of equality and rights today. To fully understand the importance of the amendment, we must consider the social conditions of the time. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, women were expected to focus on domestic responsibilities, such as caring for the home and raising children. They had limited access to higher education, professional careers, and political involvement. Because they could not vote, their perspectives were largely excluded from decisions that affected society. This reflects a broader system of inequality that limited women's opportunities and reinforced traditional gender roles. The women's suffrage movement challenged these norms and pushed for a more inclusive society. The movement emerged in response to these limitations and became one of the most significant reform movements in American history. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution represents a critical expansion of democratic participation in the United States. Before its ratification, women were excluded from voting, meaning they had no direct influence over laws, policies, or leaders. This exclusion highlights a major contradiction in a democracy that claimed to represent all citizens. In this presentation, I will argue that the amendment both reflected ongoing social changes, such as growing demands for gender equality, and actively reshaped society by expanding political participation. Using both historical and philosophical perspectives allows us to better understand not just what happened, but why it mattered then and why it still matters now. The women's suffrage movement began in the mid-1800s as part of a broader push for social reform. A key moment was the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the first major women's rights convention in the United States, where activists created the Declaration of Sentiments, which boldly stated that men and women should be equal. Leaders like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton played critical roles in organizing campaigns, delivering speeches, and advocating for change. Elizabeth Cady Stanton drafted the convention's Declaration of Sentiments, which demanded that women be granted the right to vote. The Declaration of Sentiments is famously quoted to say, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." This statement deliberately echoes the Declaration of Independence, asserting that women deserve the same rights and opportunities as men. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was also a powerful writer and speaker who helped shape the goals and arguments of the suffrage movement. She worked closely on these issues with Susan B. Anthony for more than 50 years. Susan B. Anthony spent decades traveling the country, giving speeches, and advocating for voting rights by persuading lawmakers and citizens to support women's suffrage. In the early 20th century, activists such as Alice Paul organized marches, protests, and pickets that brought national attention to the cause. These women faced significant opposition, including legal barriers and social criticism, yet they remained committed. Their work laid the foundation for future generations and shows how long-term activism is often necessary to achieve meaningful social change. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was officially ratified on August 18, 1920, after more than 70 years of activism and advocacy. The process was not easy, as many people opposed women's suffrage, arguing that it would disrupt traditional family structures or that women were not suited for political decision-making. Suffragists responded with organized protests, public demonstrations, and political lobbying. Their persistence helped shift public opinion and convince lawmakers that women deserve full participation in American democracy. Their persistence demonstrates the power of collective action and civic engagement. The final ratification represented not only a legal victory, but also a shift in public attitudes about women's roles in society. Over time, this led to increased representation of women and greater attention to issues affecting women and families. Additionally, the success of the suffrage movement served as a model for other social movements, including the civil rights movement. It showed that organized efforts could challenge inequality and bring about meaningful change, reinforcing the idea that democracy can evolve over time. The impact of the 19th Amendment was both immediate and long-lasting. Following its ratification in 1920, millions of women across the United States gained the constitutional right to vote and were able to participate more fully in the democratic process. In the 1920 presidential election, women voted nationwide for the first time, significantly increasing voter participation and demonstrating the political influence of female citizens. Organizations such as the League of Women Voters, founded by suffrage leader Carrie Chapman Catt, worked to educate new voters and encourage civic engagement. The amendment also opened doors for greater political representation. Although progress was gradual, more women began seeking and holding public office. Jeannette Rankin of Montana, who had become the first woman elected to Congress in 1916, served as an early example of women's growing role in government. Over the following decades, women gained increased representation at local, state, and national levels, helping shape policies related to education, healthcare, labor rights, and child welfare. Leaders such as Eleanor Roosevelt later used their positions to advocate for social reform and human rights, expanding opportunities for women in public life. Beyond its direct political effects, the success of the suffrage movement inspired future campaigns for equality and justice. The movement demonstrated that organized activism, public demonstrations, lobbying, and grassroots organizing could produce significant social and political change. Civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. and organizations like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People adopted many of the strategies used by suffragists, including peaceful protests, public advocacy, and appeals to constitutional rights. The suffrage movement also influenced later efforts for workplace equality, educational opportunities, and reproductive rights. However, the amendment did not immediately guarantee equal voting access for all women. Many African American women, particularly in the South, continued to face barriers such as poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation because of discriminatory Jim Crow laws. Activists such as Ida B. Wells and Mary Church Terrell continued fighting for both racial and gender equality. These barriers remain until later reforms, including the Voting Rights Act of 1965, provided stronger federal protections for voting rights. Ultimately, the 19th Amendment marked a major expansion of American democracy. It transformed women from largely excluded participants into an influential voting bloc, encouraged greater representation in government, and provided a powerful example of how citizens can work together to challenge inequality. Its legacy continues to shape modern discussions about voting rights, political participation, and equal opportunity, demonstrating that democracy is an evolving system and can be strengthened through civic engagement and social reform. From a philosophical perspective, the 19th Amendment is closely connected to Enlightenment ideas about equality, natural rights, and democratic government. Philosophers such as John Locke argued that all people are born with natural rights, including life, liberty, and property, and that the governments derive their authority from the consent of the governed. According to Locke's theory of the social contract, citizens should have a voice in the governments that make and enforce laws. Another philosopher, John Stuart Mill, was a supporter of women's political, social, and economic rights and an advocate of equal opportunities. In 1867, he was the first member of Parliament to call for women's suffrage. He championed the right of women to vote, own property, and access higher education, maintaining that intellectual equality would allow women to reach their full potential and contribute meaningfully to society. The struggle for women's suffrage demonstrates how philosophical ideas can influence real-world political change. Concepts such as natural rights, equality, justice, consent of the governed, and democratic participation provided the intellectual foundation for the movement. Activists used these principles to challenge existing laws and social norms, eventually persuading many Americans that denying women the right to vote was inconsistent with the nation's democratic values. The ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920, therefore, represents not only a political victory, but also a triumph for the philosophical belief that all citizens deserve equal rights and an equal voice in government. The ratification of the amendment helped redefine the meaning of democracy in the United States. It expanded the definition of who counts as a full participant in society. Ethically, it reinforced the principle that justice requires equal representation and opportunity. This shift was important because it challenged long-standing inequalities and set a precedent for future expansion of rights. The amendment demonstrates that democracy is not static, but can grow and become more inclusive over time. After women gained the right to vote in 1920 through the 19th Amendment, activists used that achievement as a foundation for later campaigns seeking broader equality. For example, during the women's rights movement of the 1960s and 1970s, organizations such as National Organization for Women pushed for equal employment opportunities, reproductive rights, and protection against sex discrimination. Leaders of the women's rights movement looked to suffragists such as Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Alice Paul as pioneers. There is a direct connection through Alice Paul, who drafted the Equal Rights Amendment in 1923 to guarantee constitutional equality regardless of gender. Decades later, the campaign was revived by a new wave of feminists. Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique, which argued that many women felt unfulfilled as solely wives and mothers. This book encouraged discussion about gender inequality. Friedan then co-founded the National Organization for Women and served as its president. The organization advocated for equal rights in employment, education, and politics. The cultural impact of the amendment extended far beyond politics. It contributed to changing perceptions of women's roles in society. As women gained the right to vote, they also began to pursue higher education, enter the workforce in greater numbers, and take on leadership roles. These changes gradually reshaped societal expectations and opened new opportunities. The amendment helped create a cultural shift towards greater gender equality, influencing many aspects of daily life. Even today, the impact of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution remains highly relevant. Voting rights continue to be a topic of discussion, and issues related to gender equality are still being addressed. While the amendment was a major step forward, it did not solve all inequalities, and some groups of women, particularly women of color, continue to face barriers. This highlights the ongoing nature of the struggle for equality and the importance of continued civic engagement. In conclusion, the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was a transformative moment in American history. It reflected the efforts of the women's suffrage movement and reshaped society by expanding democratic participation. By analyzing this event through both historical and philosophical perspectives, we can see how it not only changed laws, but also influenced ideas about equality, justice, and citizenship. Its legacy continues to shape our society today.